a medical doctor gets nutritional education in medical school? Anybody?
15 minutes.
12? 12 or something like that? Yeah, about 2 hours average. 2 hours out of 8 years of medical school and residency. That's pretty nutty. So it's, and I admit it, when I was in school, I just wanted to learn about, drugs and surgery. I thought they were cool. The nutrition journals, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. I was totally brainwashed, but now I know the incredible importance of nutrition, what we put in our bodies. So I'm going to turn it over to Sabine. She can tell you a little bit about herself, and we'll talk about anti-inflammatory foods. Anybody have any questions before we begin? Logistics? No? Oh, you know what? I did forget one thing, real quick. So we're going to do a little stretch. We're going to do our little cocktail later before lunch. But have everybody please stand up. Okay, we're going to reach the ceiling. Take a breath in. And then reach to one side. Gently, going to be able to tickle a little bit. And reach up. I got a pop. Anybody got a pop? Yep. Okay, reach to the other side. Breathe. Sorry. Awesome. And then gently all the way down. Roll it back up. Really slowly. And just support your back and just a little lean, just if it's comfortable. Little lean, shoulder shrug. Move your neck a little bit. See, I'm getting you ready for African dance tonight. Roll the hips, maybe. Some more shoulder shrug. Little knee bends. One more stretch up top. Big breath. And then let it out. Awesome. Give your neighbor a high five and say, "You're awesome." Some of you may know me, but I do have a private practice in Lake Placid. I am an integrative and functional nutritionist. I am trained in mind-body medicine now. I'm also a certified food and spirit practitioner, and I'm trained in functional medicine nutrition. So I do a lot of different things. My approach really is balancing the whole self, the whole person really, and that's kind of the introduction. When I go into anti-inflammatory foods today, for me and how I practice, and what I believe it wouldn't be accurate if I said these foods are going to, these foods are anti-inflammatory foods and they work all by themselves, because basically we have to set up the environment in our bodies to actually work with the anti-inflammatory foods better. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more before I go into the foods, just so you have a good base on really how to apply it into your life, so you can evaluate your lives and what will really think about it. Think about your life, and we'll get to the foods too. How many people are really interested in anti-inflammatory foods? Okay. All right. I was trying to think of something funny to say right there, and I couldn't, so. So before we begin, just take a few deep breaths. So, breathing in clean air, and just think, breathing out tension. Breathing in clean air, and breathing out tension. And do you feel that in your body? Do you feel that relaxation? That's the beginning of the
the anti-inflammatory response. That's, we want your bodies to be calm, to be relaxed, to be receptive to setting yourself up for an anti-inflammatory life, if you want to think about it. So it's just not food, it's an anti-inflammatory life. So just so you know, slow, deep breathing does calm the sympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that's very active in times of stress. So that's the area, we need that system, but that's the system that we want to calm down. And just deep breathing and relaxing can calm that sympathetic nervous system. So, as I see it every day, you can do one of two things: build health or produce disease in yourself. So, just breathing is the beginning. So we want to think about resetting the stage. Bringing ourselves into a lifestyle that's anti-inflammatory. And so resetting the stage is really setting it up, looking at your life and how you want to live your life. So is how we eat a reflection of how we live our life? So what kind of energy do we see when we look at those pictures? What feels better when you think about that? Nice, calm eating right there, or eating, drinking, watching the TV or computer at the same time. Don't you just get a sense of a good energy and a bad energy feeling a little bit when you just look at those? And so that's where the beginning stages of evaluating your own life. How are you eating? Do you wake up in the morning and wolf down your food, or are you eating it in the car when you're going to work? And do you get 2 minutes for lunch and just wolf down your food? That can create. You want to receive the benefits of food. Are you receiving more negative energy from food than you are positive? So really, that's the first stage of really evaluating your own life, because you could be eating all the great things. You could be eating all the anti-inflammatory foods you should be eating and taking all the supplements and doing everything that everyone recommends for you, but are you actually living life and embracing that kind of lifestyle to accept it? So how we live supports inflammation, and the environment inside our body can support inflammation. So creating the right environment inside and outside of our body. So think about how balance, what does balance mean to you? I'll go into that a little bit. Where do you need a little bit more balance in your life? So these things together. So we're going to talk a lot about anti-inflammatory foods, but just those few pictures, did you see the correlation between eating and living? So it can make a big difference. What happens to your body when you look at these? What feelings arise? Just thinking about that. Look at this. And look at that. Look at that. You feel like you're at the eye doctor? Or that one. But do you feel a difference in your body when you look at each of those pictures? So food can transfer that same kind of energy. And I'll pass this quickly, but this. That's a big one, right? And that bothers some people, so I'll take that one. So do you feel like this most days? Or like this? Do you understand where I'm going with that? So for our bodies to truly achieve the benefits from the anti-inflammatory foods, we must create the environment within ourselves that is conducive to healing. So, because you might be somebody who eats really well. I see people that really hard. Their diets are beautiful. They're doing everything in the world, but what piece is missing?
So doing Facebook during dinner is not a good idea, right? She's talking about me, guys.
I have another slide for you on that one though. So this experiment's really interesting, and I've been doing this experiment for the past year, so I want to share it with you. So this is a positive thinking experiment by Karen. You're probably familiar with him, a Japanese scientist. So on one jar you write "I hate you," one "I love you," and actually in this experiment it's rice. And in this experiment you actually you can talk to the jar and say negative things to the hate jar, positive things to the love jar. This is after day 27. The hate jar is growing mold, and the love jar hasn't grown anything yet. But, so think about the energy you receive from food. So, why are people who eat maybe don't eat as healthy, and they're really healthy? They're typically happy individuals, healthy individuals. Not saying that you should eat junk food, but it's the energy that you receive from food sometimes too. So some people so you might see people who are very positive outlooks on life, very healthy, and they don't have great diets. So, and that's something to evaluate too. So my experiment, though, it's hard to, the pictures didn't come out that way. I've been doing this for a year. These jars are a year old. So my hate jar has, it says anger, dishonesty, I forgot hate, anger, and dishonesty, and my love jar is love, peace, trust, and my old dog's name, Shauna, that's not like anymore. So this is quinoa, not rice, that's why it's darker. But the hate jar doesn't have much growth at all after a year, a little bit. And what happened with this experiment is, like after a couple months, there was nothing happening to either jar. So I talked to one of my teachers, because I was going through the Food and Spirit certification, and I said, I talked to the group, and I said, there's nothing happening. I said, but I feel really bad hating the hate jar. I could not hate the hate jar. And I feel like I don't feel good telling I hate it, that type of thing. It was very uncomfortable. And she's like, well, so I'm thinking that, we were thinking that, I'm not really giving the hate jar negative energy. So she said, try neglect. So I separated it, I tried neglect, and I felt really bad. So then I finally pulled it out, and they're both sitting on top of my stove. And so the hate jar started to grow a tiny little bit of mold, but not much. So I'm just letting them be the same. And it goes from there. So I just thought, that's just another thing to think about, when you're thinking about that transfer of energy too. So, if you like my Facebook page, maybe I'll update people on where the hate jar is in a year from now. But right now, I can't even get rid of the jars because I'm too attached to all of them. It's a very strange thing. So why did I go into this before I go into inflammatory foods? That's an ugly picture of a wound, right? So, is that going to heal? I mean, you could be taking all the great supplements in the world to heal that. You could be putting all the best ointments on it that would normally heal it. But what about, every hour or so you're scratching it, right? You're scratching it, you're irritating it, you're causing it the inflammation. So that's where that calmness comes in our life. We want to allow our bodies to heal. And it's the same with that type of. Same with this. We need to allow it to heal. We need to stop irritating. We need to stop triggering the inflammation. So would we tell an athlete to keep training with an injury? Would the injury heal? Would it heal as fast? We need to stop triggering the inflammation, and that's where our lifestyle comes into play. So diet supplements can't do the job by itself. So they are extreme, there's a ton of research on anti-inflammatory foods that they work on a cellular level, so there's a lot of positive things, but I just, for me and how I practice, I think it would be, I would not be able to do this without telling you, like having you look at the whole picture of things. So stop multitasking and allow your body to heal, right? So how many of you find that space to allow your body to heal? So that's something to think about. And there's also, you can also find somebody who does mindfulness training, or you can learn it on your own too. There's a book by John Kabat-Zinn back there. But mindfulness is one way to really begin to calm yourself down and being very present. And we're going to do a mindful eating exercise right at the end before you have lunch. And one other way that I look at balancing people's lives with food and anti-inflammatory foods is, I do have a copy for this for people at the end, but this is one thing that I do with food and spirit. It's balancing your life. It's looking at the 7 aspects, which kind of correlate with the chakras, but there's a food and nutrition aspect really to every chakra too. So looking at how you live your life and how you eat, and it's a different way of maybe giving you some tools to balance yourself. So, what is inflammation? We're talking about anti-inflammatory foods. What do you think? What's inflammation to everybody?
Irritation.
Heat, pain, irritation. Yeah. So, inflammation can be a normal reaction to injury and infection, but when it continues and we don't get rid of it, that's when it can trigger chronic inflammation, is when it can become dangerous, right? So I'm not going to go into, this isn't going to be a lot of information on what you shouldn't have. I'm not going to go, we know that sugar and the wrong types of fats and fatty acid imbalances and a lot of food allergens and intolerances can trigger inflammation. It could be wheat, it could be dairy, it could be tons of different things. It could be types of vegetables and types of fruits related to what's going on. It could be gut issues, low plant pigments. I'm going to talk about the foods that we want to have more in our diet. And I'm not talking about, and I'm going to talk more about more everyday things, herbs, spices, plants, different things, different fats, different things to change the environment in our body. Not the really hard foods to do, but also our lifestyle. We do know, and I am going to go into this briefly, we do know that the processing of food, what it has done to our food supply, has been a big factor in relationship to inflammation in our body. So the macronutrient composition so with food processing, we've changed the macronutrient composition, which is the carbohydrate, protein, and fat composition. With food processing, it's changed the fatty acid composition, which I'm going to go into a lot. The fats and the type of fats are really important. Because processing has completely changed the structure of our fats, and that's been a big factor. It's taken out the vitamins and minerals. It's changed the glycemic load, meaning the processing food has not just high carbohydrate, but how the processing has been done has changed how the food turns into blood sugar and in our bodies, which is related to inflammation. It's taken most of the fibers out of the diet. It's changed the food to make it really high sodium and low potassium and low other minerals. And it's changed the acid-base balance, which is a big deal too. So a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about, like I opened with balancing our lives, but we look at food. we need to balance the types of foods in our body too. So we need to balance the environment in our body, and that's what food will do too. So I am going to talk a little bit about probiotics, prebiotics, acid-base balance, essential fats, and then some phytonutrients and pigments in foods. But how many people know anything about alkaline foods and acid foods? What do you know about it? Like what comes to your mind when you think about acid and alkaline foods? Anything?
Changes how foods break down, and for me, I used to get yeast infections if I got too alkaline.
Yep,
That was biggie for me.
yep, okay. Yep. Some people can, there are, so our body requires a specific pH, which would be the alkaline, middle ground kind of. But the difference, the typical American diet is actually more acidic too. It's not, normally people aren't more alkaline, but it can happen. But when you look at the typical American diet, the foods that are more acid can be a lot of your animal proteins, a lot of your proteins in general, even nuts and legumes and things, your sugars, your starches, your grains, all those types of things can be a little bit more acid. The more alkaline foods are a lot of your plant foods, for the most part. What happens is that with a typical American diet, it's high in sugar, high in protein, low in plant foods, and it creates a much more acidic environment in the body. And the acidic environment creates more of a pathway to disease. So you're more susceptible to running into more chronic diseases that are inflammatory related. So that's kind of why we want to think about, like a long time ago, everyone was following the Atkins diet, right? And there were people lost weight with the Atkins diet, but it didn't really take into account, it was more high meat, right? But it didn't really take into account the balancing out of like getting a lot of plant foods in there so you wouldn't create too much of an acidic environment in the body too. Where maybe the new versions of the Atkins diet, a little bit more paleo, that type of thing, gives you a lot more plant foods to create that balance in your body. So that's really, really important. The plant foods in your diet are really, really important to create that balance. And so that's something to evaluate if you're not getting a lot, but if you are doing a lot of protein, but you're not getting those plant foods. Does that make sense to people? Are people paying attention to that now?
Yes.
I'm not going to go into that in big detail, but oops. So one of the things that we want to think about if you do have a lot of inflammation, we want to look at our guts. How healthy are our guts, and is that maybe the root of some of our chronic inflammation? Because you could have an inflammatory response to many foods, many toxins in the environment, different things, because your gut is allowing some of those toxins in your body. There's something called leaky gut, that type of thing. So that's an area. If you are somebody that has a lot of gas and bloating, a lot of poor digestion, a lot of heartburn, a lot of different digestive issues, is it enough to just avoid the foods that are bothering you? Probably. That's where you want to look a little bit deeper into your gut. And I'm not going to go into completely healing the gut today, but you want to think about creating the right environment in your gut. So I talked about acid-base balance, creating the right balance in your body with the plant foods, but the gut, if you do have something like leaky gut or dysbiosis, which is just interchangeable, but you may be tolerating, there may be a lot of things you do not tolerate that trigger inflammation. So how do we keep that strong? First, creating the right environment in the gut. If you do have a lot of gut issues, there may be things that you have to take out of your diet. You may have to take some things to heal it. So I'm not going to go into that today, really, but thinking about two things. You want to think about the bugs that are good for your gut. Because the bugs in our gut, you know, the healthy bugs, are related to all types of things, keeping you know, our immune system, keeping our gut barrier strong, and when we create that imbalance in our gut, we have a lot of bad bugs, we don't have the good bugs in there, that's when we run into a lot of problems too. So, typical American diet is also, history-wise, has been very low in the foods that feed the good bugs. Okay, so we want to feed the good bugs. We want to. It's just like, you know, everything needs food. Everything needs food to live, right? If you're eating a lot of sugar, you're feeding the bad bugs. A lot of the foods that I'm about to show you are going to feed some of the good bugs. And also, typical, you know, our lifestyles. There could be, you know, a stressful environment, medications, antibiotics, steroids, all different types of things kill the good bugs too. So that's something, that's where the next thing, the probiotics, which you have a lot of examples today, come into play too. But some of the top prebiotic foods. And there's a lot of research on prebiotic foods. Because we have so many different strains in our gut, and all different, and they do research on the strains in our gut, and there are certain people who eat more of a certain food have more of certain strains too. So it's getting a variety, it's getting that balance. And people who want these slides, you know, instead of having to write everything down, we'll send you a PDF of the slides. So, but most of the prebiotic foods are from plant foods. They're also associated with some grains too. But your greens, your legumes, your mushrooms, your garlic, bananas, asparagus, almonds, all types of things, all different varieties. So getting a lot of plant foods are going to help feed the good bugs. Fiber, having a really high fiber diet, the short chain fat, what happens with the fibers in your diet are also really needed to feed those good bugs. And remember what feeds the bad bugs. You guys remember what feeds the bad bugs?
Sugar.
Yeah.
Hamburgers, obviously.
Just kidding.
Yeah. 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 White flours, sugars, everything, right? So, but a lot of things happen too. So to keep our guts in balance, you know, we want to feed the good bugs, but we want to add good bugs back in. That's what the probiotics are. So you might take probiotics, you might take it as a supplement form, but our wonderful chef, Kathy, today is going to show you lots of examples of cultured foods, but these are the foods that actually have the good bugs in them. So the cultured dairy products, the fermented beverages, the kombucha, which is here, the fermented grains, which, and fermented vegetables, and then things like kimchi, miso, tempeh, things like that, all fermented. So Kathy will be able to answer a lot of those questions. She's our expert on that. This is a quick method to fermented grains, but she still is more of an expert on that too, so we'll let her do that. I did put a little brief slide in on bone broth, which I'm not really going to go into because I'm not going into the deep healing, but bone broth is part of our part of the lunch today. It does have, for people with a lot of issues, gut issues, it can be extremely healing in relationship. It does have a lot of anti-inflammatory components, including its proteins, its amino acids, It also, so it's been shown to help with osteoarthritis and inflammation in the gut, a lot of minerals in there. So there are a lot of healing properties, and there's some people that may need to do a lot of bone broth. So we balance the acid-base balance, right? So we balance our guts, and then we balance the fatty acids in our diet. This I had to cut down the slides a lot because I had way too many slides about it. But and I'm not going to go into this picture really, but the fats make all the difference on a cellular level in our body, okay? And that's where so much has happened with our diet. You know, now we are trying to put everything back in that we took out, right? You know, so we're correcting all the bad, you know, all the things that the 80s basically did to the diet, you know, taking out, everything was fat-free, right? And if it was sugar, it was fine. You know, jelly beans, no eat, you know, fat-free yogurt and jelly beans, right? That's what I loved. And in high school, high school, college, jelly beans, fat-free yogurt, Diet Coke, and popcorn. Bad. But what processing food did was take out these great fats, the great fats that we need in our body, and process them to make an extremely terrible fat for us. So that's not what they do on a cellular level. So the things that fats do on a cellular level, they're extremely important. They're messengers, they're involved in chemical reactions, they're precursor to bile acids and hormones, they're involved in blood clotting, they're involved in bone formation, brain function, lots of different things. So fat-free diets, there's a lot missing, and so I'm only going to explain some of these words so you understand a little bit as we go through this. But saturated fats are very stable, right? They're very stable, so that's why trans fats were made, because they are the man-made saturated fats almost. I mean, they do occur a little bit in animals, but so what happens is that we take the unsaturated fats, like the polyunsaturated fats, like soybean oil and corn oil, and we hydrogenate it. We do a chemical process that makes it unsaturated, so it's very stable. So then it's added to all the convenience foods. That's why you can buy some food on the shelf with soybean or corn oil that's been hydrogenated and it'll last for 2 years, you know, because it's that stable. It doesn't oxidize well. So that's where some of those fats came in. Then your monounsaturated fats are like your olive oil. Okay, so they're stable, but not as stable as saturated fats. That's why, like olive oil, we tell you just sauteing, right? You can saute with it, but don't cook it at high heat because then it becomes unstable. And that's why the polyunsaturated fats, which are like your most of your other vegetable fats are mostly polyunsaturated. They're very unstable. So cooking at high temperatures, not a good idea, because when you cook at high temperatures, it creates carcinogens, free radicals, that kind of thing. So it's not it becomes a very unhealthy fat when you cook it at high temperatures. But also your fish oil is in this state, is a polyunsaturated too, the DHA, and then your fish oil. We're going to talk about fish oil a little bit. But I threw these two in because conjugated linoleic acid is something that people take now, right? I don't know if anyone's heard of it. They take it as a supplement. But it is produced in grass-fed animals too. And it's also found in eggs and some plants. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then there's arachidonic acid, which is also produced in some animals, which is very inflammatory. And I know that's a little confusing right now, but
Oh, so Sabine, in the old days when you and I grew up, in McDonald's, I hear that they used to make their fries in tallow,
Yeah.
beef tallow. So that's like fat from beef, but now it's all like vegetable oils, which
Yeah.
are supposedly healthier, but they're not. So I think it's really interesting how, and I'm sure it's much cheaper than getting tallow. So our fast food was actually healthier in the past than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, that, it would have been more stable too in that high heat.
Right.
And yeah, although, which is funny because when you're bringing that up, the French fries are deep fried. And so when you go to a restaurant or a fast food place and they say that they use trans fat-free oil, when you're heating it to that temperature in the deep fryer, which is like really high degrees, it's not staying at, you're heating it, it's turning into a really bad fat. So deep frying is not a good idea, not a good idea. But the things that are stable, the really saturated ones are stable, like the animal fats, and the other one would be coconut oil. Oops. So I just wanted to say something about the arachidonic acid. I know a little. This is a little chemistry, but up here, because I'm talking about balancing the fatty acids. So arachidonic acid, this can turn into, it goes into inflammatory things in our body, where the omega-3s, certain omega-3s, they produce anti-inflammatory, I'm not going to go into the names of everything, but they, anti-inflammatory compounds. So what happens is, so our food supply has a lot of corn oil, soybean oil, and some of these other processed vegetable oils. It has a high amount of omega-6s in it, which actually, and we have a very low level of omega-3s, right? So that can actually trigger, in the long term, more of an inflammatory response in our body by not having the adequate balance of fats. And so the typical food supply is corn and soy-based, right? So thinking about where your fats are coming from. There are some in animal fats too, but that's where that balance comes in too. Is we do still want some saturated fat from those products, but we want to take a look at, are we triggering the anti-inflammatory response by getting some of the omega-3s in there too, so that's where that balance comes in.
Are there omega-3s in grass-fed land animals?
Yes, there are more than, yes, there are some omega-3s in there. I was really excited when I put this handout together, and then as I was looking at my slides, I'm like, boy, that's probably too complicated. I could still get
It's pretty.
but if you look, okay, so saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats. So the yellows are the saturated. If you look here, the mono and the mono is like olive oil, the poly is most of your other vegetable oils. Mono can be like avocado too. So we look at the types of fatty acids in those. So like there's linoleic and linolenic. And one of them is inflammatory and one of them is anti-inflammatory, right? So that's why we take a look. That's where that balance of fatty acids comes into play, right? So if we're having way too many, so I mean, I can give people the sheet so you can kind of take a look at that. I could talk a long time on this, but you look at some of the ones, the poly is also the good ones, the omega-3s would be the linolenic, right? So I might want to, so we look at, okay, walnuts have more omega-3s, and we look at chia seeds have more omega-3s, and salmon, so we can kind of break it down into the good fats and the bad fats. So that's, we can spend an hour on that, but I won't. But that's where the balance comes into play, is the fatty acid balance. And that can easily, it can get confusing and it can throw you off, but how does it, but it really is, you want to just pick some foods, which I'll go into, that can trigger that give you some more omega-3s and balance. You want to avoid the, things that have too many omega-6s, like corn oil and soybean oil, and different vegetable oils. Use pure oils, like olive oil, the monounsaturated fats. Balance it out. High temperature, I would recommend coconut oil at high temperatures.
How about palm oil, like the sustainably harvested palm oil?
Palm oil is much like coconut oil in that sense too. That's more stable too. Yeah, that's more stable. But this is a breakdown. This isn't my graph, but this is a it's a little bit older, so it doesn't have everything on there. But it's a breakdown of the oils. The red is saturated. The blue is polyunsaturated. The orange is the omega-3, and the yellow is monounsaturated. So you can see, like the corn oil and the sunflower oil and the soybean oil are primarily that omega-6, that inflammatory fat too. And then they hydrogenate it, so then they make it a trans fat, and then it becomes even worse. So it's that balance of getting the wrong types of fats, triggering the inflammatory response, and not getting enough of the fats that balance it out. So getting some omega-3s to, and people take omega-3s, right? You take fish oil. Fish oil are omega-3s. So people take fish oil to trigger that inflammatory response. But don't we want to look at our whole bodies creating that inflammatory response in our bodies with food too? So, it's going to take longer than dosing with the fish oil because you're actually working on changing your environment and thinking about, it's a balance game, right? You're balancing your life. You're trying to balance your food. You're trying to balance different things to create that inflammatory response in your body. So do the fat parts make sense to you, or is it completely confusing?
Are any of those fats kind of balanced on that chart, on the last chart with the color chart? What would you consider like a balanced omegas fat more so than another?
Well, if you look, look at coconut oil. It's all red, it's mostly saturated, but it's a completely different saturated fat. So I wouldn't tell people to only use coconut oil. That's where that balance comes in. Coconut oil has so many beneficial properties outside of being a fat. Just the properties of coconut oil is a whole different topic, but you definitely want to get monounsaturated fats in there. So this is just oils. These aren't nuts. These are just the oils from the food. But olive oil, if you look at olive oil, that has a lot of the yellow. The ones that are yellow have more mono. They'll balance that out a little bit. Canola oil seems to have a lot, but I'm not telling people to use canola oil because canola oil. What? Yeah, actually lard is less saturated than the coconut oil. Yeah.
This is going to sound strange. Where does margarine fall in that?
Margarine, the old type of margarine was hydrogenated soybean oil, corn oil typically. So it was a man-made saturated fat, plus it had the parts that weren't saturated yet were the omega-6s, so we would get a lot of inflammatory factors related to that. And our body isn't very receptive to trans fats. It's not really, they're not as, there's a little bit produced in animals, but they are not normal in nature for us too. So we're taking a type of fat, chemically altered fat that our body doesn't really know what to do with. So Put
only
hands
asking,
on our arteries, what?
I'm only asking because I remember as a kid, they would be like, butter's bad, go to margarine, margarine's bad, go to butter. And it keeps going back and forth, and my mom used to buy butter and put it in the blender and add olive oil and just whip it. She said,
That's
I
nice.
need margarine,
Yeah.
you know, and
That's nice.
she would put it in the margarine container when her
Yeah.
friends would come over, she's like, oh, here's the margarine.
Well, you have to think about so many nutrition recommendations. You know, the low cholesterol diet in the 1980s, you know, all nuts were off it. You couldn't have a nut. You know, you had to use low-fat margarine or whatever, you know, and so there was a lot of knowledge that we didn't have when all those recommendations came out too, so.
And Crisco,
Huh?
and Crisco, I
It
remember.
was Crisco, it was a hydrogenated, it's a hydrogenated fat, yeah, so it's the worst. And I grew up with, butter. I didn't grow up with any margarine, because my parents were from Germany, you know, so I grew up with pretty much real food, you know, and for the most part, until I, you know, was in high school and was able to make some of my own choices, then I started making bad choices, I think. So, I mean, some people still choose to use margarines, but you really need to look at, you know, you don't want to see the word hydrogenated in there at all, because it's a chemical process that makes it saturated. So, I'm usually recommending sticking with butter, coconut oil, olive oil, if you're going to use it in the cooking process.
So I just started using ghee, and I
Yeah.
don't really understand how it comes about. I was told it's clarified butter. I can read the jar, but what is it? Is it the top that when they boil it that's skimmed off, or the bottom that's left?
I don't remember. Yeah.
The bottom?
Yeah. Can anyone else answer?
Can I help on that? Because I come from an Asian country.
Yes.
And my grandma actually used to, it comes from cow's milk.
Okay.
But when you ferment cow's milk, you know, you're going to make it into yogurt.
Okay.
There is a bit of fat that comes to the top. And we take it off, and that's how you make clarified butter.
So just the top?
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
breast
it's only
milk, it
from-
separates
Yeah, it
versus-
separates. There's
Okay.
this fat when you take
Yep.
it off, and that's.
And that's
becomes
it?
ghee. That's ghee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's
Okay.
supposed to be like really
Right.
clean, really good
Yeah.
for you?
You've got to look for the real yellow ones, because then it's grass that counts.
Yes,
This is gonna come
that is
out.
what I got.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So when you look at the typical American diet, so, you know, I know we're saying sugar is, you know, sugar is evil, it's inflammatory. It's not the only thing, you know. I mean, it's the sugar coupled with the trans fats, coupled with the omega-3s and all the processed foods. You know, that is what, you know, I mean, and sugar too, definitely, but that creates that big inflammatory cocktail, you know, that you have to think about, you know, looking at everything that we're doing. As somebody who's, you know, if you don't use any fat in the day, it's like, you know, like, if you are just, some people don't use any fat at all. That concerns me, because there's a lot of processes in our body that need it. And then it's the type of fat. So, some of your top fats that are anti-inflammatory, I didn't really get into the fish yet, but the fatty fish have the EPA, and the fatty fish go directly into that, the type of fat in the fish go directly into that pathway without having to take too many steps that trigger the anti-inflammatory markers. The grass-fed animals are going to have more omega-3s than the grain-fed. Some of your nuts and seeds have a little bit more omega-3s, more of your walnuts, your chia, your flax, your hemp seeds are some of the highest. Almonds are on there because they are actually the most, although they don't have as many omega-3s in them, but they are the one nut that is very alkaline. So where the others are more acidic. So that's something to think about too. And then the monounsaturated fats, the olive oils, avocados, those types of fats are very balancing, creating that balance between the polyunsaturated and the saturated. So they're like a bridge. You don't want too many of one, too many of the other, but balance it out with the monos. So maybe wild salmon, maybe almonds, maybe walnuts, maybe seeds, maybe olive oil, maybe avocado. Some benefits of omega-3s. We know they're anti-inflammatory. Some benefits. A lot of research of omega-3s. And it's funny, my master's thesis in the 90s was on using omega-3s in place of prednisone for inflammatory conditions. So, like I looked at omega-3s for rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease. I don't remember, there was another one, I can't remember what else it was, but so there was research back then of using it in place to keep that inflammatory response down. The thing is, it's creating that anti-inflammatory environment, so you get a regular amount. It's not like what happens with some people though too. So you might take fish oil for a little while and you don't feel like it did any good. You definitely should look at the quality, because what they found in some of the research with the fish oil is that the gelatin capsules in the fish oil was actually a really bad fat. It was actually creating the inflammatory response too. So you weren't getting the, when you saw some of the bad research on some of the fish oil. So you should really, if you're actually going to, if you're someone that takes fish oil or wants to take it for a certain condition, you should really research the type of fish oil that you're getting to. But I want to talk about food in relationship to, we want to change that environment in our body. We don't want to just take one supplement, although there are needs for supplements, yes, but not thinking of just doing one thing to change that environment too. So we want to continuously create that anti-inflammatory response. So that's getting omega-3s on a regular basis. And the reason why fish oil works so well though, just to make me think of it, when I was back at that pathway, the chemistry pathway on the arachidonic acids, the inflammatory pathway, the nuts and seeds, like the omega-3s from plants, have to go a few more steps to trigger those anti-inflammatory compounds, where the fish oil kind of just jumps right into the pathway right there, so it's much faster. And so that's why fish oil might be better than flax oil if you're taking it therapeutically.
And I also heard that like people with chronic illnesses may not be able to do those conversions, all those steps. So
Yeah,
fish
yeah.
oil might work better for them than taking flax oil, because they don't have the energy, or they have a broken down system, so they can't really get the omega-3 benefits out of flax or hemp
Right.
because of that system, because they're sick.
Yep. Yeah, because it does take, your body has to do some work to get there. So this is, I'll have when you get the slides, you'll have a website, but this is just 5 tips for choosing sustainable seafood, which is really just from the Center for Food Safety. That's, they update every year what fish is good and what fish is bad. So they did put out a list for best options for the summer on West Coast and East Coast, and then what the worst options are, West Coast and East Coast. So East Coast worst options, looking at PCBs and things too, and mercury, orange roughy, farmed salmon, shark, Atlantic bluefin tuna, and Atlantic cod. So just to keep in mind. Because you're going to see like black cod being one of the ones that are higher in omega-3s. But it's there's different fish websites. And I know, Karen, on your website, I think you have a link to order good fish, right?
Right.
From a company, yeah.
Yeah, Vital Choice. I've never tasted Alaskan salmon that good anywhere else ever. I just love their stuff.
Yeah. But if you want lists of better seafood to, the safer ones to get, these three companies, so the Center for Food Safety, and seafoodwatch.org and Monterey Bay Aquarium.org, they put lists out of your safer seafood. So I'm just going through those facts that we kind of went through. So the grass-fed beefs, this is just a little bit of research on the grass-fed beef, but in all these cases, basically, it ends up that they have greater amounts of CLA, which there's positive effects of the conjugated linoleic acid, which I'll talk about in a second, and more omega-3s. So there are a lot of positive components to being grass-fed over grain-fed. More grain-fed beef have more omega-6s too, so they're a bit more inflammatory in that sense. So the CLA, which I mentioned in the fats, is from, it is an omega-6, but it's a little bit, it's made from the linoleic acid, so it's a little bit of a different composition of some of the other omega-6s. A lot of research has been shown to, it does help improve immunity, it supports the inflammatory process, bone mass, blood sugar, reduce body fat, reduce risk of heart attack. So there's been some studies on CLA. Not saying you should take it, but what I'm not saying you should take it as a supplement, but some people do. But you get a little bit more in the types of, by changing your meats to grass-fed meat, that type of thing. It's in eggs also. This is some research to watch, and it's to think about maybe why, and to think about where some of the research has come in with inflammatory processes in meats in general. There is a sugar that is in research now that they're looking at that it has been more linked to inflammation, and it is found in lamb, pork, beef, goat, venison, and higher amounts in goat and in goat cheese. So that's another thing to think about if you're eating only one kind of meat, even if it is grass-fed, or if you're choosing better foods, if you're eating those types of foods on a regular basis. This is, something that they're looking at in research, and they're also looking at a protein in beef, it's the types of cows, like Holstein has the inflammatory kind, which more than the majority of the cows in the U.S. are Holstein cows. So, and the A2 type of this protein is less inflammatory. And it's found more in grass-fed Jersey and Guernsey cows. So, that's something to think about though too. Is it that, you could also, if you're somebody that eats a lot of meat, eats a lot of beef, it's what you tolerate. Do you want to take, and you're still having inflammatory problems, do you want to take a look at that? That's something to watch.
When you talk about the venison though, the sugar, how's a wild deer gonna get this?
It's a sugar in the meat. It's a natural.
Oh, it's natural.
Sugar in the meat, yeah.
But it's causing inflammation in the people that are eating it.
Well, large amounts has been linked to inflammation, yeah. So
Okay. So it's all about like moderation.
That's what it's where the balance comes in.
Okay.
So if somebody is eating, if you are, if you're eating a high meat diet and you're not balancing out balancing out your fatty acid, balancing out your plant foods, it can trigger more inflammation, yeah.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons why I use muscle testing for food, is because one person really might need to eat, red meat 5 days a week because they're dealing with fatigue and whatever reason. Logically, sometimes I'll think they need something, and when I muscle test them, the guy says, nope, I need something else. So for me, actually Sabine suggested that I eat less land animals and more fish, and when I muscle tested myself, she was absolutely right. Because we have local farmers here, we don't have local fish farmers. I was eating a lot of land animals, and I think that my body really wanted the seafood now. It's a little lighter, I don't have adrenal fatigue anymore, I don't have fibromyalgia anymore. And even Rivka, who by the way I'll introduce a little later, she does Akashic Records reading, and she's a Reiki teacher as well, and part of our Adirondack Wellness Network. Even, when she talked to my guides, they said the same thing, lighter foods, and I wouldn't have thought that logically, but now I'm like, okay, this is what my body wants. So, Sabine's right about balance, and sometimes you just have to ask your body, like, what do you need right now? And I kind of just go with that.
Yeah. And if you're still having a lot of inflammation, and you're a creature of habit, you think about, that if you're eating the same kind of meats all the time, the same kinds of, other types of foods though too, are you triggering that inflammatory response somehow? So then there's avocado actually is a monounsaturated fat, so it has that nice balancing effect, but it also has phytosterols in there, which in the 90s they started putting in margarine to lower people's cholesterol. So you might see margarine with plant sterols in there, but that's not telling you to do that. But it has some plant sterols in there, which are like, almost like plant cholesterols, but they actually are very anti-inflammatory and help lower our own body's cholesterol too, if that's something you're looking at doing. Phytonutrients, the plant pigments. If anyone has seen me before, I always talk about the colors in plants and the different types of phytonutrients in plants, because there's so much research on how important they are on a cellular level at preventing disease. And so inflammation is one of those types of things. And I do have a plant handout. When I give you the handouts, I give you just a handout on colors and what phytonutrient and like what does that color do? It might say anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, that type of thing. So we do know that phytochemical or plant chemical, which are often associated with the pigments, are associated with decreasing chronic disease, which in most of these diseases are related to inflammation, right? And how many fruits and vegetables do you get a day? That's just something to think about. Because this is, it's a few years old, but this is average daily intake in the United States. So the yellow is less than 1.5 times per day, and the darkest green is greater than or equal to 1.8 times per day, which is still not a lot, right? If you think about the plant foods. And we almost need more plant foods than we used to, because they are a lot of the plant foods and also the fatty acids too, but we're always combating toxins, free radicals, things that can turn into disease, right? So we need more fight in our body, really. And the plants give us a lot of those components too. And there's also a little change in how they've been grown, that they may not be as potent as they used to be too. So, a lot of organizations are recommending, up to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables a day as a preventative measure. So, how many people get more than 5? No.
On a good day.
Yeah, so it's something to think. That's really something to think about. And then you get a lot of phytonutrients, but then you also get that nice acid-base balancing too, right?
What's a serving approximately?
Typical would be half cup cooked in a cup raw.
A cup, 1 cup raw and half cup cooked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or, with fruit, anywhere, like berries can be almost to like maybe 2/3 cup on average, size of a normal size of a pear, apple, that type of thing would be fruit. So the anti-inflammatory herbs and spices, these are big, right? These have those phytochemicals in there, those phytonutrients, those plant chemicals that can trigger inflammation, that can trigger the anti-inflammatory effect. I'm only going to talk about the top 3 right now. How how many people have heard of turmeric as an anti-inflammatory? Eating it with, taking it with black pepper or with oil, it enhances the effect of it, so that's just something to think about. Like, it's in a salad dressing today, so it's with oil, so that's good. It's with pepper too, but it enhances the activity of that phytonutrient effect. But tons of research on turmeric. It is many studies, and has been comparable to some of your anti-inflammatory drugs, so they're doing a lot of research on it. It's recommended with people with inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis. These are just different benefits and research that they've done on it. So I think that, like, turmeric is almost like a really super herb out there, and they're not, and a lot of the research isn't showing side effects from it either, so. So you do have it in the salad dressing today, so people know that. The other thing, another one would be, there's a lot of research on ginger. Ginger is an anti-inflammatory herb too. A lot of different research. And this, I just highlighted free radical protection, in lessened depletion of glutathione, which is one of our body's most powerful antioxidants in there. So our bodies have our natural own antioxidants too, other than taking them. So keeping our natural antioxidant properties strong is good. So ginger does that. It also is involved in suppressing the pro-inflammatory compounds though too. So there's, so just so you realize, there's a lot of research behind some of these herbs and spices that we're saying that are inflammatory. So ginger, turmeric, and cayenne are big ones. And the hotter the chili pepper, the more capsaicin, which is that phytochemical that is an anti-inflammatory. The hotter the pepper, the more it has in there. And this is just a few tips on buying herbs and spices. We only have 10 more minutes, so I'm gonna buzz through this a little bit. Phytonutrients in plants, the colors again, they are, the deep rich colors are gonna be the things that are very anti-inflammatory. So your dark greens, your reds, your blues, some of the enzymes in papayas, pineapple and papaya, also work as an anti-inflammatory digestive aid, but those deep rich colors. So that's another thing to think about. Do you get colors in your day? Some people eat the same fruits and vegetables every day. So benefits. So kale has some omega-3s in there, just so you know. Cherries, a lot of research on cherries for fibromyalgia and osteoarthritis. The phytochemicals in berries also help decrease, they repair cells, fight cancer, lower inflammation. Beets, major, they decrease those, COX-1 and COX-2, they decrease homocysteine. Also related to decreasing C-reactive protein and different things, the inflammatory markers in the body. So a lot of research on these foods. Bromelain in pineapple, you might see that in a supplement too. That's an enzyme that decreases inflammation. Quercetin is in a lot of foods, also decreases inflammation. It's one of the things that are in tea that's anti-inflammatory. Onions, big one's funny because when my grandmother in Germany used to have, like when my father was sick, she would boil onions and have him drink it in milk. And I didn't really know anything about it until I said, oh, it's probably the quercetin that was good. So a lot of the old things that they used to do. This is that phytonutrient spectrum, which is going to be a handout for you guys. Getting most of from your plants, really waterless cooking, steaming can enhance some of the phytochemical activity. So I just want to, I gave you 3 phases of an anti-inflammatory diet. The fourth one is you could do low or no grain, low dairy. You always want to kind of do low chemicals. I'm not going into the pesticides and things like that, but so getting lots of fats, getting lots of colors. And if I looked at the breakdown of the 4 phases,
there's an equal amount of your monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, lower in sugar than the others, lower in carbohydrate, but higher in fat for those fats. So, and a lot of plant foods. So you get a lot of plant foods, a lot of good fats. So you can, when you get the slides, you can look at the transition of the phases. The first phase, they're all about the same amount of calories. The first phase was basically white bread and soda, though. So ask yourself a few questions. Do you give your body the space it needs to heal? Do you get sources of omega-3s? How many plants do you get a day? How many colors? How can you create this in your own life? How can you create that healthy environment in your own life? So, shopping lists, shop local, examine your stress, make a list of what gives you energy and takes away your energy, heal your gut, avoid pesticides, GMO, food additives. I didn't go into the things that trigger all that inflammation, but get colors, get healthy fats, maybe begin by reducing your flours. Try a new recipe every week. I did give you recipes in that book too, some salad dressings and puddings and some fun things. Think about the balance in your life. You can talk more about balancing through food and spirit with me if you want to. Get a little bit more of this. My body mirrors my state of mind. I am healthy, whole, and complete. So that is something to think about when you're starting your new journey. That was something, I was offering something for the future, but I forgot, and I didn't forget, I just forgot to put on the slide. I am doing nutrition consults, mini ones tomorrow afternoon too, so if anyone wants to sign up for that. And in the handout you have the phytonutrient handout, the food and spirit handout, some recipes, and I put a shopping list in there for everybody too.
Thank you.
Now we're going to do the mindfulness eating exercise. That's one of my, I try to have positive intentions every week, and one of mine is doing mindfully eating, and one of the reasons is because I'm really bad at it. So I have a timer on my smartphone, which of course has a cell phone protector on it, and I set it for 5 minutes, and I try to eat mindfully for 5 minutes, and I got to tell you, I get to about 20 seconds. And that's about it. I mean, it is that hard for me. So I need just as much practice as anybody else. But it really is something. At least I'm not on Facebook anymore when I'm eating. And I'm not eating in the car. Thank you, Sabine. Okay, so you're all going to get some food. She'll guide you through this, how this works.
And mindful eating can help change your relationship with food, so it can work on that energy you have with your food too. And it also can enhance your digestion, because you have to think about your first digested enzymes in your mouth, right? So one thing when people are eating very fast, they're wolfing their food down. Right? If you're wolfing your food down, you're not swallowing. And what happens is you're giving your guts too much to do, because everything that your teeth and your mouth should have been started doing with the digestive enzyme in your mouth and your teeth, you're making your stomach do it. So then you get gassed, you get bloating, you get, that type of thing. So really thinking about that chewing part of mindful eating too.
Can I share something? I think I might have read this in the Detox Chocolate book, but swallow your food and drink your soup, or no, the other way around. Drink your food, chew your soup. So that you chew your food so far that you're drinking it.
Oh, yeah.
And your soup, which is already liquid, you need to chew. And that's always kind of stuck with me. Not that I don't make it much past 20 seconds either. But when I think of that, it does give me 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, just thinking about it while you're doing it will make you do it slower. Does everybody have something in front of them?
Almost.
Okay.
I think the wine did that.
Okay, so people don't eat them if you get them, because we're gonna do an exercise with it. Do you have any extra?
Yes.
It's funny, because a colleague of mine, we were doing this exercise at a conference, and they passed out the little things, and right away, she ate something. So, as we go into this, you almost want to go into it like you're going into a meditation, right? You want to calm the body, because you want to, when the body's calm, you're going to digest better, right? So, take a few deep breaths. Breathe in clean air, and breathe out tension, right? Keep going breathing. And take a look at the food in front of you. And pick it up. Pick up a piece and hold it in your hand. And think about, as you're holding it, like it's the first time you've ever seen it. The first time you've ever held it. So, think about how it feels, what it looks like. Where it might have come from to reach your table today. That blueberry has taken a journey, right? So, it started in the ground, nourished by the soil, nourished by the water from the sky, grown into a bush, delicately picked to be in front of you right now. So it's that transfer of energy from the earth too in your food. And think about that. So thinking about what this blueberry may taste like, what it will feel like in your mouth, what kind of nourishment is it going to give you? So bring it up to your mouth and to your nose. Maybe smell it. Does it have a smell? Is anything happening? Are you starting to salivate at all? Are you starting to wonder about this food that you're about to put in your mouth? And when you finally put it in your mouth, try not to chew it. Just put it in your mouth and feel what it feels like in your mouth. Is it smooth? Does it have a little bruise on it? Maybe your blueberry took a harder journey than some of the other blueberries that are here today. And so just really think of what that blueberry is going to give you once you finally bite into it.
when you're ready, if you haven't yet, bite into that blueberry. Think about what it's giving you. Is it sweet? Is it sour? Is it juicy? Think about all those antioxidants that are anti-inflammatory in that blueberry. And are you able to just chew it before you swallow it a few times? And get all the nourishment out. And as you swallow it, thank the blueberry for the gifts it just gave you. Because really, our food is a gift, right? Food is what keeps us alive. And thank you, blueberry. So how did the blueberry taste? Was it hard for people to go that slow? Did it make you think about the blueberry a little bit? And its journey and what it gave you? But, so that can be used to a lot of different ways to help change your relationship with food a little bit, to help your digestion, to eat slower. Really, with mindful eating, we say chew 20, 30 times. It would be hard to do with the blueberry, but 20, 30 times. So if you think today when you're eating, chew your food well, right? Think about the gifts that are on the table today, or that you will have on the table. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.